Okay, and good morning, everyone. And every day we rise is a great day to be alive. And my name is James Slim Overton, and the Seven Cities Forum of Hampton Roads presents Portsmouth Coffee Talk Morning Show. And we are here with co-host, the Colonel, Thomas the Colonel Chapman, and we're waiting on our other co-host, Leah Drake Stitt. Hopefully she'll be joining us shortly. But we have a special guest, and he's always special because he's a reoccurring guest, and I think he's up there with in the high numbers of being on our show uh, the most. He's up there with Dr. Duncan because he was on there before we even started Portsmouth Coffee Talk. So none other than Dr. Bruce Copeland, who, for those who don't know, he's the coordinator of the school social work services for the Hampton City School District. And he is a adjunct professor at Norfolk State University in the School of Ethel Strong Social Work, I believe. I'm sure that's where he is. That's his area. And Bruce, I saw something too where you also can be labeled as a psychotherapist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been licensed as a clinical social worker since 1995.
Mhm.
So, and that simply means that I have the training that's recognized by the state to provide mental health care, provide individual, group, family therapy, those types of things.
Okay, so we've been relying on your professionalism and the information you share for years now, and today is no exception. And we labeled this or promoted this as a topic of talking about dysfunctional families and the effects that it has on African American communities. And it's well, everybody knows if they know you on your Facebook page, they know how you feel, and you don't hold back any punches in talking about the effects of this dysfunctional families and how it comes about. But before you start talking, I'll let the Colonel do his disclaimer. I almost forgot
Yes.
about it. You might need that today.
Yes, but it's all good. But the views stated on this program are the hosts and the guests, and no third party advisors or anything else. This is us. So hopefully this keeps us out of Facebook jail, and we'll try to keep it to within the confines of what's acceptable to so on.
Okay. So, Bruce, I saw look briefly at a few researchers, and all of them were pretty much the same, dealing with dysfunctional families. And their conclusion was it's a breakdown of the Black family has created a multi-generational crisis within the Black community. And that sort of runs towards, what you've been saying for years, and probably uh, I'll let you get started and tell why that probably is and how it's affected. Because you talk about how some of the families absence of fathers, so there are some exceptions where fathers weren't in the homes, and the people and the children excel quite well. Sometimes because of that, they work extra hard. But for the most case, I'll let you go ahead. I'm not the expert. I'll let you go ahead and start the conversation there and get us going.
Yeah, well, Slim, of course, in anything, there are exceptions to the rules. You can have children that come from homes that are the most, they have the most negative impact on the child's well-being, and that child turns out to be someone great. An example of someone who grew up in a family where the father was absent and turned out to do great things would be our former president, Barack Obama, had a single mother. And look how he turned out. The issue is that people will point to that isolated example, and in research, we call them outliers, and suggest that that's how it is. It is not how it is. Those are exceptions. And what we really should be looking at is the rule. In research, you don't make generalizations about social societal trends based on a limited sample in your study. You look at large numbers of people and you make your determinations based on that, not those few people who don't fit in a particular pattern. One thing I would say about families and about communities is this. I don't believe that there are strong families in the absence of strong men. Now, we'll get caught up on, well, my mother raised me by herself and I turned out just fine. And that could be true. But generally speaking, we need strong men if we're going to have strong families. And then strong families are what make up strong communities. So when we look at communities, if we have a huge, overwhelming number of families that are female-headed, the presence of men is not there, then we have set the tone for communities that don't thrive. One of the sayings that we have in the Black community, and I think it's taken literally, like we do sometimes on a lot of other things, including religious things as well, is that there is a literal interpretation of it takes a village to raise a child. Now that sounds beautiful when you say that. It takes a village to raise a child, but the village cannot supplant a responsible mother and father. So one of the things that we've done in our community is that we've tried to normalize dysfunction. And I understand that for some, because when we normalize things that don't appear to be right, it makes it possible for us to rationalize that what we're doing could be right. So we try to normalize things. We try to normalize it to the degree that it has such an adverse impact on our individual functioning, our family functioning, and our functioning as a community. Children need responsible mothers and fathers in their lives. There are certain things that we get from a mother that we cannot get from a father. And we should know that as men, as individuals growing up. You cannot replace that which you get from your mother, even when you have the best father, nor can you replace what you get from your father when your mother is an amazing person. They bring particular aspects to our development that we need. Now, I always say this here. I always tell people that you really don't need two eyes to see, but who wants to live with one? There's a balance that you get in life when you have two responsible parents given to you. So many of the problems that we see in our communities, and if we look at some of the things that happens with our young people, we always talk about what happens, but we don't talk about why it happens. We have an incident where a 6-year-old shoots a teacher, and we know it happened, but we don't talk about why it happened. What was the structure of that family? What was going on in that child's life? And I guarantee you that in many instances, we find that children who behave in very destructive ways, normally, there's a demographic and a common denominator as it relates to their family and their family structure. I was tuning in to the local social media yesterday while they were having the Something in the Water concert. And I know there's a generation gap. I used to listen to music. However, music today is quite different than it was when I was young. But they had an entertainer on stage, a young lady, and she barely had on any clothes. And she was enticing the audience with her rear end and the dancing that she was doing. And I saw no value in that. I understand as well that there are many young people who are viewing that particular performance, and they're internalizing certain values as a result of it. Young girls are internalizing values about what it means to be a woman. Young men are internalizing certain values about what women like and how they should be treated. And this kind of overwhelming negative imagery of what we see with young people is having a devastating effect. Now, one of the most important protective factors, people talk about protective factors, and I always say, I always explain to them that your most important protective factor is your family. The stronger your family is, the more protected you are. And so when we have large numbers of people being unmarried, many by choice, having multiple children out of wedlock, many by choice, it has a devastating effect on the well-being of the child. And in many instances, people with the least amount of resources have the most amount of children. If you look at the data, it will tell you that middle-class people don't have 5, 6, and 7, and 10 children. They just don't. It does not correlate with their individual and collective goals of being successful. However, people with the least amount of resources, the least amount of information, have the most amount of children. So we find too many children growing up in these environments, and it really, really impacts their development, and it has negative consequences for our community. We try to normalize single parenthood. There was a report in 1965 by Daniel Patrick Moynihan talking about the state of Black America and the breakdown of the family. And what he mentioned was that one of the big factors that will destroy, and that had begun to destroy the Black family during the 60s and 70s, was matriarchy. Normalizing that women should be the head of households, therefore relegating the man in the family to a marginal status. So patriarchy is not in the best interest of the African-American community. Now, you might have a lot of women who are feminists, or a lot of women who are protective of their position and their status that will argue that point. They would say there's no difference, but there is a big difference. We have a society today that tries to erase gender, literally trying to erase gender, trying to suggest that there is no gender. That's not normal. It doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying that from a religious point of view. I'm saying that from a biological and social science point of view. Erasing gender. Now, there shouldn't be discrimination against people regardless of their gender, but to say that a man can just simply decide that he's not a man, but he's a woman, and that we're all supposed to believe that just a statement about a change in that regard is enough to make the gender be erased. So you see that in our society, we're trying to normalize a whole lot of things so that anything goes. There are no rules. You can say, do whatever you want to do, and the rules don't matter. Now, when you have a society where rules don't matter, it's like living in a lawless society. And no one wants to live in a lawless society. Rules, boundaries, and all those things are important. That's why you see with families, people believe that they can create any type of structure they want, and it's equal to every other structure. But the data and research will tell you very, very clearly that children, the ideal situation for children is in a home with a mother and a father who are responsible, engaged, and accessible. Now, when you deviate from that, it is possible to have children to grow up that are healthy and wise and strong and can do great things. That is possible, but that's not the norm. That's not what we're seeing in our communities that we're complaining about. And if you look at some of the things that we've talked about on this show in the past, we talked about sometimes the crime and violence in our local community, and why is that? If you study and look at each one of those individuals who have committed violent crimes, including murder, on the streets of our city, and you go back and you do a background study on their family structure and their family situation, and you'll find out that it's a common denominator among them. Most of them are males. Most of them are low income. Most of them come from families where they're headed by a female and there's no male who is responsible, engaged, and accessible in arm's reach of that child. But you don't find middle-class kids coming from two-parent households with responsible, engaged, and accessible parents committing these murders on the street. Now, this is where we get stuck. This is our default for just about everything. Whenever these things are said, people will say to you, it's the system, and it's racism, and the government tried to push Black men out of the home. I'm not saying that racism is not an issue, because it is. What African-American person in our age group would act as though racism doesn't matter? It absolutely does matter. Who would say that the system is broken? Who would not agree that the system is broken? The system absolutely is broken. But in my profession, we look at macro, which talks about policy, broad policies, maybe from the federal government on down, and how we can address policy that would support families. And I agree with that. That's macro practice. But when you talk about micro practice, it's not one or the other. It's both and. We should be addressing policies that hurt families. We should be addressing those. Women should be able to take leave. Men should be able to take leave at the birth of a child, and on and on and on. I can go on with multiple policies that we should be supporting that help families. But while we're waiting on white people to decide that they need to be an ally in ending racism, we still got to live. We still have to raise our families. And some of us get stuck on the historic legacy of slavery, poverty, and oppression. And we get stuck there, and we won't allow any other discourse to occur. One of the kinds of discourses that need to occur that we won't allow is looking at people and having an expectation that they be responsible for their behavior. Now, one of the things that I say about our community, some of us, is that we internalize that anything that we do is a result of racism. Anything that happens in our community is a result of racism, and quite a bit of it is. However, we internalize at another level that we're victims of everything and everybody. And then when a person internalizes that they're a victim, then they tend not to own responsibility for what they have contributed to their problem. And they don't own responsibility for solving the problem. They rely on other people. One of the things that have happened with our families is that I guess we could look back at the 60s and 70s during the period of, used to be called ADC, it's called TANF now, more commonly known to some people as welfare, those types of things. And they always say that, you know, you couldn't get your welfare check if a man was in the home. We look at that as an explanation for men not being in a home. Well, in part, that could be some explanation, but there were also some men who were in the home in spite of all of that. What happened is that when those programs came about, they were supposed to be programs that were aimed at giving mothers and children some relief. They were not necessarily programs that said we're going to help the whole family and that men would be able to be in the home and receive the same benefits. They were really targeted at children and mothers. That's why it was called Aid to Dependent Children. So what ended up happening is that a lot of families begin to be able to live without a man. Now, I'm gonna give you an example. Before we had these types of social programs, the way that we supported our families were with families. It would be nothing unusual to find a mother, her daughter, father, grandfather, multiple generations of families living in the same house, supporting each other. There was not necessarily any significant government involvement, but when individuals and generations of families came together, they pooled their resources and they were able to help each other. Once these programs came about, people started to what I call marry the government. So instead of marrying a man, women began to marry the government, and the government supplanted the man. So I really believe that these programs, with maybe some good intentions, had a negative adverse impact on our families, because before these programs occurred, families lived together, they worked together, they share it. Another thing, I work with children who are homeless, and I find that there are many children in our community who don't have a home, they're living with other people, et cetera. But some people consider that if a daughter is living with her mother, that she's homeless. In the old days, that was an acceptable standard, multi-generations of people living together, supporting each other. Many of us may remember growing up, especially if you lived in poverty, you might sleep in the same, multi-generations of people in the same house. Sometimes brothers slept in the same bed with other brothers. They shared so much and they supported each other as families. But when we allowed the government to come in and supplant the man, then that's when you saw the most problems. There was some information that I saw recently where the person was stating that African Americans will be a permanent underclass if there's no change in how our community functions as it relates to families. So at the end of the day, I really believe that the issues in our community are systemic racism. I want to say that because somebody will call in, they will comment and say, well, what is he talking about? He doesn't see racism. I absolutely do. It's systemic racism. It's a legacy of poverty, oppression, and injustice. And in addition to that, we have not done those things, many of us, that will help us to survive that. And one of the best ways for us to thrive as a community, as a family, there are a couple of things. One, we need to consider that we have to acknowledge that the traditional family structure works best for children. And if you're not able to establish that and maintain that, then maybe you should consider whether you are prepared to have children yourself. The government should not be the person responsible for raising your children or financing your children. Most normal people, most people who function normally, raise their own children without the financial assistance of the government. That's a responsibility that you have. Men are supposed to provide and protect. If you're in relation with a man who's not capable of providing and protecting, you may not want to have children with that gentleman. You may want to consider that that may not be the best ideal for you. The government is going to only do so much. They've never designed programs that ensure equity and ensure equality. They've never done that, and they never will in our lifetime. So while we're pontificating about racism and what the government should do, we're falling behind because there are things that we can do individually to strengthen our families. Sometimes when you see people that have been married for a long, long time, they'll say, what's the key to marriage? What's the key to a happy marriage? Well, the major key is you just stay together. It's as simple as that. You don't treat relationships and marriage like you treat trash that you dispose of at your house. Those things you just don't throw away. Now, no one should remain in an abusive relationship where they're being physically and emotionally harmed. But aside from that, when you commit, and you stay together. So, and then the other way, Slim, is that when we have healthy families, we're able to create, with the proper information and knowledge, generational wealth for our families. Being married and coming together as a couple is a wonderful way to begin to acquire wealth. Divorced women, a lot of times, end up in poverty when they become divorced. When you're married and you're working together as a team, as a family, you're able to acquire wealth. The other thing is to ensure that your children have a proper education. I mentioned this before, but there was a book called Covenant with Black America, which basically said the most reliable way to move from poverty to middle class is an education. And many of us are perfect examples of that. Most of the people that you have on the show that come up here, like myself and other people, and we talk about these things, it's not that we had a privileged background. Many of us are first generation college students, those who went to college. Some may be second. We're looking at college students now who are third generation maybe, but through one generation of people becoming college educated, we tend to be able to break the cycle of poverty that existed in our families before that person became educated. So when you bring a mom and dad together in the proper structure, dad understands his responsibility to provide and protect. Mom understands her responsibility to nurture and teach. And really good fathers do it all. They provide, protect, nurture, teach, they do it all. And you educate your children, you build strong families. And again, without strong families, you don't have strong communities. You cannot make a community strong simply by asking the government to give more and more money to causes that you believe money should be given to. I always say, when you give somebody something, for an example, a job, we need to give these young people jobs. Okay, we give them jobs. But suppose they don't have a work ethic. Will they come to work on time? Will they work hard? So a prerequisite to a maintaining a great job is having a great work ethic. So sometimes we just want money thrown at problems, and we believe that the money will solve the problems, and they don't. The money does not solve the problem.
Let me make the transition from the radio, and thanks for giving us food for discussion once we come back. But I want to thank all the listeners on WGPL 1350 AM for listening to us today, and join us again next Monday as we come back with more intriguing guests. But Dr. Copeland, I think you gave us a lot of food for thought there. And sometimes, what you have to say, and others that feel the same way, the people that have studied human behavior and see a pattern of generational dysfunction feel the same way. And sometimes it's a hard pill for some people to swallow. And how, and in your profession, you've been doing this for a long time. How are the people accepting? And what do you see as far as the people accepting this that are in those situations? Are they trying to explain their way out of it, or just don't want to see reality? Because the welfare, as it was called a long time ago, was supposed to be a temporary fix, not a generational fix.
Mhm.
And that's where it's come to, where people just generationally rely on it and rely on it. So those people that really need to hear this usually are the ones that don't get the message.
Mhm. Well, you know, it's an unpopular position now. If you start telling Black people that, hey, look, we can do this. We need to accept some responsibility, and be and believe and start to internalize that the locus of control is internal. It's not external. In spite of the racism that we see, we can still do better in making the decisions that we make individually. That's an unpopular decision. When you talk to African American leaders, if you get in a room of African American leaders and you talk about um, our people being responsible, and you're not saying that the government is racist and this and that, you'll be run out of the room literally. They don't want to hear that. So I think that part of our problem is that we don't look at it from both sides. Absolutely, we have to make the government be responsible for providing equality and justice for people. But at the end of the day, we have individual lives to live. And in spite of all of the things that are happening around us in this world, we still have to make wise decisions about how we move forward if we want to strengthen ourselves individually and empower our families and communities. I mean, I live in this country just like everybody else. I've experienced racism, and I experience it now. I'll experience it tomorrow. And but I still have to go forward. I cannot go out and father multiple children out of wedlock. A conscious decision that I make to do that, a reckless decision sometimes that I make to do that, and then say it's the government's fault. It's my fault. That's my fault. And if you say that to somebody, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that individuals make bad choices sometimes. And no matter what the choice they make, they can always circle back and link it to the government. You cannot link my decision to be with multiple women and father multiple children out of wedlock to the government. That's the decision that I made. And we can't have that courageous conversation in our community because our leaders will attack. They will say that you are a sellout. Don't you understand history? All of these things. At the end of the day, it just happens to be that having been someone who grew up in poverty, but who I've been away from that life experience for many, many, many years now. All of my friends are basically middle-class people, and they all pretty much live the same. They're educated people. They rear their children, the mother and the father, and they make conscious decisions to do the right thing in spite of racism that exists. I even tell my own young adult children, I say, don't ever say you couldn't accomplish your goal because of racism. How about I succeeded in spite of racism? And in those two scenarios, it does not dismiss the idea that racism exists. It's just a mindset. It's reframing how you look at those situations. If you say I didn't succeed because of racism, then you have said out loud to me that the locus of control for you is external, that you can't do anything unless somebody around you does something to make it happen. But when you say I've succeeded in life in spite of racism, you're saying that the locus of control is internal, that in spite of all of this stuff that's going on around me, I am the master of my faith, the captain of my soul. I can do this in spite of it. And we have to stop poisoning the minds of people in our community by constantly telling them, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim. You're a victim of racism. You're a victim of this. You're a victim of that. Because they don't internalize that they have any responsibility to do anything to fix their situation. And I think that's what's happening in our communities. I think that's what's happening with our families. And I don't think that we should be normalizing single parent households. We should not be normalizing. Even one of the things that irritates me, we're coming up on Father's Day. And a lot of times I see these posts on social media where people are saying, it's Father's Day, but I've been a mother and a father. No, you have not. You have not been a mother and a father. You might have been an excellent mother. You cannot be a father. And we try to normalize nonsense like that. they put the ideal in the minds of people that women can be mothers and fathers. Women don't want to be fathers, if you want to know the truth. Women do things that they do out of necessity. Sometimes women are in situations that they don't want to be in, so they do the best that they can. They don't really want to rear their children alone without a responsible partner. They don't want to do that. Some of them have to do that, but instead of acknowledging that we have a concern, an issue, we try to normalize it. Oh, it's okay. You can raise these children by yourself. You don't need a man. There was something that I said recently on social media that got a few people shook up. But it's a fact. They say that white women go to college to find a husband. Black women go to college to prove that they don't need one. It sounds crazy, but I'm gonna tell you why. It's a general statement that will probably cause you to be bothered, but hopefully it will cause you to think as well. The way white women are socialized, they are socialized toward marriage and children. My daughter tells me all the time, who went to private school for many, many years. These little white girls, she went to private school, graduated from high school. Some of them in the freshman and sophomore year of college were getting married. Their parents socialized them toward finding you a husband. Now, probably out of necessity, because of what has happened to the Black man in our community via slavery and other things, Black women have had to be super women. However, and that's a negative perception as well. When we present Black women as superhuman, they don't get the benefit of protection. They don't get the benefit of somebody recognizing their humanity, their feminine energy, but we were painting a white woman as being precious, delicate, somebody that needs protection. But then we say Black women can tolerate anything. And that's not fair to them. So out of necessity, many of them understand that I must get a college education. I must be able to take care of myself, because the pool of eligible men for various reasons, incarceration, et cetera, they have far less choices. But it's not normal. It's not the thing we should seek in our community. We should really, really promote marriage among people who decide that they want families. But yeah, I think generally that's true. White women are socialized toward children and families and getting married, and Black women are seeking to be able to survive and be prepared for a time where they may have to go it alone, unfortunately.
Dr. Copeland, all of us sitting here like we back in
in class. We're in class today.
But I'm
Actually, I'm gonna be teaching a family class next semester, so
okay.
they won't run me out of there.
Anyway, I'm sure my co-host has some comments or questions, whether they agree or disagree, or something they'd like to add. So.
Yeah, I'll start. Dr. Copeland. So yes, I think you stated one time, we talk about how Black men and the Black families and the Black folks, I'll say all encompassing, say we play the victimization role. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? That's what we should ask. So in this world of institutional racism that goes back. So if you really look at it, I think you stated that, and we talk about public policy starting in the 60s, when you address where the welfare system came up and we couldn't have a Black man in the home. And that was the way things were. The man was there when the social worker, whoever came to check on him, he had to run out the back door and have everything out, so you wouldn't cut that check off. But with that, fast forward today, you can look at how those same policies, especially with the Confederates now, look at their budget that they just passed, where they want to put new work requirements on if you're going to get Medicaid. So you're getting Medicaid, and say, for instance, I'll say you're in a wheelchair, or you're on dialysis 3 days a week. You know, you can't work because I'm getting dialysis 3 days a week. There's a work requirement on that if they want to do that. And if you don't meet those standards, they throw you out of the system. So, and then fast forward that, the policy was, or has been, we talk about the war on drugs, and which was a policy to end 3 strikes you're out. That supercharged the school to prison pipeline that has destroyed the Black family in its totality, because if you're a Black male and you have a felony, and just about everything today is a felony, you don't have the right to vote, and within the system, you can't get a good job, can't work for the federal government, can't go in the military, you can't do this because you are a felon. And then, so what are you going to do to make a living from that? And that's one piece there. And then you also talked about, which also affects the choices that women have to find a spouse. So, but there's a responsibility on their end not to have all these children, because if you're with a man that's got 5 kids by 4 different other women and you know about it, something's wrong with that picture. Am I correct?
I do agree with some of what you said.
Yes, yes. So if you don't, let me know. So you also talked about, I think you addressed family leave. Yes, there is a political party that wants to have family leave, which would help families when the wife or whoever has a child, that both parents would get leave. The military is ahead of, which was normally ahead of society, where they've already passed, where the other soldier, the male soldier, or will get leave, free leave built in. I think it's 6 weeks of leave, so they can help that bonding with the child, and to strengthen the family. And so they are ahead of society out here from the civilian sector. So I wanted to add that in, as you talked about family leave. So what else? I got some notes here, there. Trying to get through it here. So with the felonies, and I talked about, you can't vote, you can't do this, can't do that. That is a policy over the long run to take us down, take the Black folks down, and make you marginalize people. They've already started and the Confederates already started a movement of, you talked about cancel gender orientation amongst the right. But if you really boil down to it, that issue is really a non-issue in normal days, except for we are in a getting ready to have a presidential election. So the right will put those kind of cultural things out there to stir up the base, put a false issue out there that doesn't really mean hardly nothing, so they can maintain power and hide the fact what they are doing behind your back to just not Black folks, but also white folks, because there's more white folks on welfare than there are Black folks. So what say you about that?
Well, a couple of things. One, you said something about playing victim. I don't want to treat that as disrespectful in this regard. I'm not saying anybody is playing victim. There is no question that Black people have been harmed through this country's legacy of slavery, poverty, and oppression. That's not playing victim. Black people aren't imagining that they have been harmed by white people.
That's true.
That's not in our imagination, and that's what I'm not trying to suggest that. But what I'm trying to say is that I believe that you can look at your experience in a couple of ways. Have you been harmed by racism? Absolutely. I think then, as a result of acknowledging that, the next thing you have to do is determine whether you're going to be a permanent victim psychologically, that you see yourself every day as a victim and you can't see anything else. I think a higher level would be to say that I'm a survivor. Saying that I'm a survivor does not diminish or dismiss the fact that you've been through something and you survived it. Now, some people will stop there and they'll think that being a survivor, that they have really conquered this whole experience by simply saying I'm a survivor. But even higher than that, the next level for me is saying that I thrive. You don't want people to merely survive. You want them to thrive. You can survive something, but still not thrive.
Mhm.
You can survive an experience, but you're not thriving. You're just barely making it. So being a victim to me is worse if you internalize that. But a better place to be is to say, I've survived it. That's better. But better than that is to say that in spite of all that I've been through, I am thriving. Look at me now and look at what I'm doing in spite of these experiences. We can't get most people there. They're either stuck at being a victim or they conclude that they've barely survived. Now, the things that you were talking about, Colonel, I agree with all of it. Those are macro. That's a macro view of what's going on. It talks about the policies that work against us, the policies of the criminal injustice system, because it's not criminal justice, it's criminal injustice.
Right.
Is 100% true. We get tougher sentences. We get arrested more, where whites are allowed to not be arrested. You can even look at the situation where the white man shot the Black African-American young man, a scholar, a great student from a great family,
That's
for
right.
ringing his doorbell. And did they arrest him on the spot? No. They let him go home or stay home, and it took them days. And had it not been for protest, if that thing had not reached the media and people heard about the facts, that man may not have ever been arrested.
Mhm.
So I agree with this. I agree that we have a criminal injustice system. But Colonel, where I am is, let's focus in on both. My concern is that as a community, we always talk about what the other people are doing to us, but we're never talking about what we do to ourselves.
Yes.
Sometimes I say that African-American people are the most reliable conspirators in their own demise. We conspire. And if we believe that the criminal justice system is unjust, don't help them.
Mhm.
That's a strategy. Don't help them. So if you think the system is unjust and you're going to get a longer sentence for robbing a bank, how about this? Don't rob the bank.
Right. You were
And see, and what we would do, we would take people who are out here. When you say that when we go out here and murder our own people, the issue is the injustice system. I'm more concerned about, why would you kill your brother?
Mhm.
Why aren't we talking about that? We will move away from why we're harming each other and what are the factors that contribute to us harming each other. And we would talk about the system being broken. That doesn't comfort a mother who's lost a son.
Mhm.
If you fix the system, she still lost her son. But I doubt if we're going to fix the system, maybe in our lifetime, but we should never stop trying. I always say, it's like people going to church. Everybody in that church isn't going to heaven, but you still preach every Sunday like that's your goal. And everybody in our community, we need to hold each other accountable. It's okay. Now, I'm not saying this, go out on national TV, CNN, and bash your own community. Don't do that. But around the kitchen table, we should be able to have a courageous conversation about what we're doing to ourselves. It doesn't mean that white people have to be invited to the table to hear the discussion. But around that table with our people, in our churches, in our civic leagues, in our communities, we got to have a different mindset. We cannot always say that the only reason we exist is to fight white people. We spend all of our energy trying to fight them and get them to give us what we feel like we deserve. Power concedes nothing to anybody. If you have all the power, you don't give it away to people. Even when you stole the power that you have, even when you got it by immoral, illegal purposes, you don't give up the power. That's the same thing as it relates to money. Rich people aren't going to give up their money. Part of what wealthy people do is that they support policies that ensures that their wealth is maintained through eternity, from generation to generation to generation. They may have stole the money, they may have used slavery to get the money, but they don't voluntarily give up money and power. So while we're waiting for white people to decide that what they've done to us was wrong and that they have a moral obligation to fix it, that's never going to happen. They're never going to say what we did was wrong and we owe you. They won't give you reparations. That's a perfect example of them saying to you, they're never going to give you what you deserve. I don't even know if they could give us what we deserve. If you think about it, Black people building this country, it could not have been the country that it is today without our labor and without our intellect and without all the things that we bring to the table in terms of the strength of our community. It's almost like telling your, and I hate to use this analogy to some degree because we're not children, but it's almost like saying to your children, they have to pay you back what you've given to them. Are they even capable of doing that? What you do for your children, could they really give back to you what you gave to them? Right. And white people are not going to give us anything that we get from them. We're going to have to take it. The way that they took it from us, we'll have to take it from them. Nobody is going to say, here's the power. I'm going to give up half of my power to you because I stole what I have. I'm going to give up half of my money to you because I stole what I have. So I think that we have to find our strength in the support of each other and our families and our communities. We must build better families, and we have to strengthen men. You know, that we really, really have to strengthen men. And I don't want this to sound sexist, but there is no strong community without strong men. There is none. There is no strong community without strong men. So we have to strengthen our boys and our men in our community, because their failure to be the providers and protectors that they are designed to be impacts women as well. We have a problem with young girls as well, but many of these young girls don't have father figures in their lives. The absence of a strong man in the lives of children, boys and girls, have a deleterious impact on their well-being.
And you mentioned about girls. We're kind of winding down now. You mentioned about the girls, and it's going to come down to realizing your consequences of today, what is going to happen. You mentioned about the young lady at the at the show that was using her body to, more than whatever given talent she had. And now next month, I think it's going to be, remember the Freaknik things that were going on early on? Hulu, I think, or somebody's doing a commentary where they had cameras there, and now they're going to do a show showing those people at Freaknik. And now the concern is the people who are trying to stop it are those ladies or girls now who are doctors, lawyers, and that are trying to stop that, because what they did when they were younger, and now it's coming back, and all this is going to be shown. And they have some people on there saying, please don't show that because that's my mother. So you have kids that are going to see this, what the actions of their parent or their mother. And it's mostly the women, vilifying the women, not the guys that were creating a lot of the problems with the women. So consequences of what you do today.
That's true.
Well, one of the things that we're doing, I don't know if you pay attention to this, but we are encouraging, promoting, supporting women who act like men. Men have always have had behavior that we kind of said that, that's the way guys do or whatever, but women still maintain a standard. The dignity and respect, sometimes with some women, not most, and definitely not all, with a small minority, we are encouraging them. That's why those women can talk in a certain way. It's like it's almost acceptable to behave in a certain way. And I just don't know. It's just quite a bit that we have to tackle. But I think the protective factor again is having a strong family. And I don't know a lot about anybody's family up here, but I could probably assume that you concentrated on being proper role models for your children. You supervised them, you mentored them, you counseled them. You didn't have to go outside to the court system to get support in raising your children. You didn't have to rely on the government for raising your children. You believed and you internalized that it's my responsibility to do this, and that everything else is something that you can use to enhance or support, but not to replace. We should have government policies that help families. Those government policies are to enhance and to support, but not take the place of a responsible mother and father. The problem is when you look to things that are meant to support as being your primary tool for doing what needs to be done. It's not. It's supposed to support. And I just tell you these last two things. I was a young person who went to college on financial aid. Now, what does that mean? That means that your family's income was low enough for you to qualify for this government assistance. That's a government program that benefited me. So I'm not opposed to government programs, but I'm opposed to government programs where you get on them and you never get off of them. If it's to help you, that's a good thing. The last thing I'll say, I have a young adult son who finished college, has done everything that I had ever wanted him to do the right way. He has a girlfriend. And I told him, this is what I told him as a father. I say, don't you get that girl pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a father told his son, not a mother. I said, what we're trying to do is to break cycles, not perpetuate them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you let that girl move in. Let her come visit, but don't be living with her under those conditions, because once you start acting like you are married and you behave in that way, the natural consequences occur. Have a girlfriend, but do you really need to get her pregnant at 23 years old? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And those are the kinds of things that I do. I don't need government help to tell him that, because I don't want him to have to rely on the government to raise his family.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't want him to rely on me to raise them either. I don't want to be a grandparent raising grandchildren. I don't want to be it. He does. If he can't do it, it should not be done. And if you're not going to marry her, then you be prepared for the next 18, 20 years of trying to navigate, negotiate, beg, and plead to see your child, to try to work out a relationship where the two of you are living separate lives. You're not a team.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that the messages we should give to our families.
That
This
is
late, but go ahead, Colonel. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the talk that we men have to have with sons, and you are so correct. My dad had that talk with me when I was out there, and then so you had the buckets, the women that you had, to make the phone call, and and then you also had saying the prospects on the other side, who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And then so you separate those two buckets, but you never mix them to where this bucket on the left is one you're having fun with, is get her pregnant, because that puts a stake in the heart of my future or your future. And as you say, paying for the next 18 years while to have time to spend with a child out of wedlock. And then also the chances go down if you're going to stay with that woman over the long run, because there's no legal tie or spiritual tie in the first place to the tied to the pregnancy.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I
you're too young to be married anyway in your early 20s. You're too young. You're not even, your brain is not even fully developed until about 27 to 28.
Mhm.
It's too young.
Yes.
I did it the first time in the early 20s, and a big mistake.
Mhm.
I was married, and my daughter came from that union, which was great, but neither one of us was prepared for that kind of
Mhm.
and what it took.
Mhm.
Luckily, we were civil enough to co-parent. It was
Mhm.
nothing really. We didn't go through all those changes, but and when we broke up, we had that conversation, like we actually knew we weren't ready, and it
Mhm.
wasn't like I'm leaving. It was like a we agreed.
Yeah.
you know, and and doing it that way made for a better co-parenting relationship.
Mhm.
And you know what? I bet none of you on this call have friends, your friends, really good friends, um, whose children are out there harming the community and other children. Your network is usually made up of people like you. And that's why I tell you there's a common denominator that we don't want to acknowledge in our community about what's happening and being able to link it to the family. And I know the family has many explanations as to why the dysfunction occurs, why the breakdown in the family. But the big issue is that in spite of all of these external factors, broad social policies that harm us, we still have to do the right things. Some simple things that we can do is you have all the relationships you want, but when it comes time for you to have children, it's better for you to have those in the context of a marriage. You shouldn't be getting married at 23 years old. You're too young. Typically, the data will show that those marriages don't work out. And you do know, and I think we talked about this before, that many years ago you had parents and grandparents who stayed married for 50 years. And we look to them and say, wow, what a wonderful life you've had together. How did you make it work? Sometimes your grandmother hated your grandfather,
Mhm.
but she stayed with him because of her religion. She stayed with him because of economic reasons. She couldn't make it without him. So they kept the family together. So everybody that's married is not happy to be married, but they maintain, and there's economic reasons to stay married. If you're married to a man and you got $1 million insurance policy on him, and it's economic reasons. You own $1 million house together. There are economic reasons. You can love the person, but love is evolutionary, just like everything else. It evolves. It may not take the same form and shape as it did on day one, but it doesn't mean that there's not love. But you stay together for a lot of reasons, building your generational wealth. You get divorced, it's gonna affect that. So it's like the Colonel, we
Kind
lost.
of disappeared on us,
Yeah.
just as I was earlier, I guess. But
Oh, I thought you.
no, go ahead. Great, James.
I wasn't saying anything. I was waiting for you.
Oh, well, Dr. Copeland, first of all, I'm sorry I came on late. I was having some computer issues, but I was listening. And these are life lessons that we all need to discuss, especially within our homes and in our communities. So I want to thank you for those lessons taught today. And I'm kind of
Torn.
yeah, 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 yeah. Uh, and there are issues that we do need to discuss further. We do need to discuss further because our families are being split apart, and our kids have gone awry and causing harm to themselves and to others. And until we address these issues within the community, our community will continue to break down. So I want to thank you so very much for all that you shared on today.
Mhm. And one thing, Slim, I would say this, when in the future, sometimes have people who feel like they have done a fair job and their families are thriving to talk about what they do to cause that to happen. Because we need to understand that some people are making this thing work. Some people are surviving in spite of all of these isms that occur in society. And we just constantly default to people who are not making it and trying to provide them with protection and support, but they have to participate in their own recovery. We can't do it for them. We're expecting the government to do it and people around them. Some people literally expect other people to do their job. You might remember this. Well, there was this lady where her child was like supposed to graduate in 12th grade. And when 12th grade came and she was like, my son, you know, when is the graduation day? She finds out he has 3 credits. And then she said, and when she started complaining, she says, where are the mentors? Where are the people that are supposed to help? Do you see that mindset that she believed that it was someone else that was supposed to do it?
Mhm.
All that.
And so we have to accept responsibility. And there's some people who are getting it right in our community, all throughout our community. And they can tell you, I did A, B, and C consistently.
Yeah, and you're quite right to have people up here that have success stories, just like we try to show students to have success stories. And and we'll do that because we just can't let all these things be normalized, like you use that term. We just normalize things, say, okay, that's the way it is,
Mhm.
not anymore. We just live together. Or or like you mentioned once before, just because you have the means doesn't mean necessarily mean you need to have 10 children by 10 different wives because you can take care of them.
Mhm.
You're gonna give the correct attention to 10 different kids at 10 in 10 different homes. Even though you can supply them, take care of them financially and give them everything they need, but the missing ingredient is you,
Mhm.
and it
You know,
can't.
you know, and somewhere or another, we're going to have to address the fact of the impact of social media and the celebrities on our kids.
Mhm.
Our kids see celebrities, they see people out in the community doing things, and they try to do it themselves and not realizing where they are as opposed to where those celebrities are. And social media is just corrupting the kids. And not only they see themselves like all the girls looking like the housewives of Atlanta now.
Mhm.
There's
And
total
behave in that way.
and they're behaving that way. And the total focus, I shouldn't say all the girls, a lot of the girls are acting like that and behaving like those housewives. So they're emulating people who have totally different lifestyles, totally different monies involved, and they're trying to keep up with the way that these people are living, and it's just not possible. And
Mhm.
I don't know what we do. How do we get people to? If you're a positive role model, you're not going to get much going on social media
Mhm.
unless you're doing something crazy and totally out of whack. You're not
Mhm.
going to get the followings on social media. So
Mhm.
I don't know what we're going to have to do. I don't know. Where do we start? Where do we start working with our kids to help them to understand that this is not true life?
And I bet all of you monitor your children's activities, their play, their
But praise the Lord, when my children were growing up, we didn't have that issue.
yeah,
Okay,
not that bad, but we still had negative influences with other people. But the whole
that's
idea,
true.
and even if you had children today, I believe that you will monitor their social media and all these other things. Whatever is the issue of the day, responsible parents prepare to deal with that. Yeah, so yeah,
But and then too, you look at the fact that a lot of people no longer want to parent; they want to be friends with their children.
exactly.
And
And
so a lot of parenting is not going on
mhm,
this day and time.
And did you see the incident on social media where the student assaulted the teacher?
Yes,
The teacher fought with the student. I guarantee you, if you talk to that student and that mother, you would see the common denominator. There is
exactly.
never a
Exactly.
father up there talking about this. There's not, that person is not involved. It's the mother. Now, whose child would do that? That's been a responsible parent.
Mhm.
We've all raised children. When I tell you my child would never assault the teacher,
Mm.
I never gave them a reason to think that they could. To curse and use profanity in the classroom, to confront the teacher. All of us have been in school. I think most of us went to Norcom. We had a certain
Amen.
amount of respect for our teachers.
You
Even
better
if
have
we
that
didn't
respect.
like them, that's right, or disagree. The attacking a teacher is, I just cannot imagine what type of environment you come from that would cause you to believe that that's okay in any way.
But also, Bruce,
The 6-year-old
the
that shot,
child will attack the teacher will call the parent will come up and attack the teacher.
Yes.
That's the cycle that we're living in now. That's
Yes.
the cycle that we're in now.
Mm-hmm.
and student, the 6-year-old that shot the teacher, who did they arrest? The mother.
But they're gonna have to start holding some of these parents accountable for these
I
kids
hadn't
with
heard
these
anything about
guns.
the father.
What'd you
You
say,
know?
Sam?
I was saying that kid that shot the teacher, they arrested the mother. Still haven't heard anything about it, if it was the father
I
involved.
don't think there's a father involved in the issue. You haven't heard anything.
In the beginning,
I mean, there's a father, but you haven't heard of father being present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they talked about how either a grandparent or uncle, somebody else, they had to sit with the kid at school. So
At school every day.
at school every day, but during this period that there was no guardian there, and so that's what happened. But I think the other thing that we're trying to get to is not talking about the outliers, but over a gross piece, there's a linkage to strong families, higher education, getting an education, and self-worth and of yourself and others, and et cetera, to your ability to achieve to get into the middle class or upper class. There's a linkage to that. All that is linked. Now, you also talked about social media. We should not talk about who's a good role model when we look at, say, the Nick Cannons of the world. And I think Leah talked about the Housewives of Atlanta. We tell our kids, this is not reality. You can't be like them. Matter of fact, if I have a child and I see I should tell him what the real story is about Nick Cannon, I should not raise him up, but I should put him in the pot of where the trash is, the toilet stool, because he doesn't represent the way a man should be.
Yeah.
So,
but
yes,
they're saying to him, because he can afford it, it's okay.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
But it's not
you
okay.
ain't that guy
Mm-hmm.
because you're still on my payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We're winding down. I'm sure the
Yes.
Dr. Bruce has to go to work, but and I told the story before. Anybody that I brought home to my house, my dad turned into Perry Mason.
Yes.
Questioned everybody, and most of those people didn't get offended. Because I would kind of tell them, I said, when you come over, my dad's gonna, it's gonna feel like an interrogation, but all he's doing is trying to, it was embarrassing sometimes to me then, but as I got older, I realized he was protecting me. He wanted to know my surroundings, who I was. He didn't want to wake up late at night because I was out with so and so and they decided to rob a bank.
Mm-hmm.
He would have figured that out ahead of time and said, well, you probably don't need to hang around
Yeah.
with him because I see something.
Yeah. Your dad acts as the DA. I'm gonna investigate him, and you don't. And so you are who you hang out with. That's the other story of that. So if you hang out with a criminal element, then your chances going up of being swept up in something. You might be a good kid, but your chances of being swept up in something bad that's going to be bad for you increases. So you have to know the difference between what is good and what is bad and what's can be harmful. So yes, I'll add that to it.
Yeah.
I said it.
Yeah, your dad was like that too.
Yes, yes. You get and you draw those lines.
Dr. Copeland, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
We kind of at the last minute, but we can always depend on you to come. And as many times you have to come back and give the same message, it's always something that you can add to it. And it's a message that people need to hear, however blunt it might be, or whose other feet you might step on. You need to step on them and just grind grind into them, some of the people. And we just need to let the people know, go to the people that are responsible, or hold them accountable. You know, just overlook that. We just let them, we normalize it, going back to that word, and we just let them go by and sit around and blame everything, but where it should start, in the home.
Mhm.
In the home. Anyway, we appreciate you, man, and
Okay.
please come back. You know, we'll have you back periodically, of course.
All right. Thank you, Slim.
Thank
Have a good day, Colonel. All right.
All right. Hey, Bruce.
Uh-huh.
Before, after we hang up, let me talk to you for a second.
Okay, should I stay on?
Yeah, you stay on.
Okay, all right.
Just want to thank everybody, and Portsmouth Coffee Talk is here for our voice, our community, and our future. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you Thursday evening.
All right.
Let me